Allen Heights church members, friends, family. So we're jumping into the Passion of Christ, and we're looking towards the end of 18, which we're really just almost a week out being finished with the Gospel of John, just reading through it. So here we are. Jesus was before the high priest, and at the end of 18, and then he goes. It talks about Peter denying two more times. So he denied Christ once, and he denied Christ two more times, and then he is before a Pilate. So one of the good things about commentaries is it points out some things that we may not see, and to see how John arranged this event, to see how John arranged this story, and John shares just some traditions or cultural traditions or things that's going on that when Judas betrays Jesus, it is not Roman soldiers, it's really the temple police that are there on the behalf of high priests that go and arrest Jesus. So then you would say, what authority did they have? Well, they have blasphemy. Don't forget they have blasphemy, and then he was claiming that he was the Son of God, and then he's broken the Sabbath. And so those are really the two big charges they have. And of course, we're talking about working on the Sabbath, miracles, wonders, those kinds of things. So the first thing that happens at the start of 18 is that we see Judas' betrayal. It's interesting that Judas doesn't hand Jesus over. He steps forward in verse 4. I want you to notice that. It says, Jesus, knowing everything that was about to happen to him, he went out and said, "Who is it that you're seeking?" So, Judas has a company of soldiers, some officials, and they're lantern torches, weapons, because they're going to overtake them. And then it says that Jesus knew this all. Then Judas comes, and it says that he steps forward, and Jesus asks the question, "Who do you seek?" Right? It's interesting because in chapter 1, verse 38, we begin John by Jesus asking, "Who do you seek?" Right? I love the way that he ties that together. It's one of the great things about using commentaries is it gets to show that. But Jesus is protecting his followers. In verse 8, in chapter 18, it talks about, "I told you I am he," Jesus said. "So if you're looking for me, let these men go." So I want you to see the sequence here, right? Who do you seek? And he's protecting his followers. And why is that? Because in chapter 17, verse 12, he doesn't want any of his followers to be lost. In chapter 17, verse 12, it says, "While I was with them, I was protecting them by your name that you have given me. I guarded them, and not one of them is lost except the son of destruction." Right? So we see this, everything that Jesus talked about is unveiling according to God's purpose. And then we finally, in verse 19:11, we see that Jesus is checking Pilate's power. So we don't want to get lost in all of this because it's important to note the structure of this chapter. So we see in chapter 18, verse 28, first of all, Jesus is arrested, and then he's going before the high priest. We know that it was early. It was Passover week. We know that lawfully Jewish leaders cannot put a man to death. We know that. And especially the type of death that Jesus, they weren't into crucifixion. That was a Roman type of death, a Roman type of execution. And so the Jewish plea for Jesus' death, we see that in order. He's before the high priest down at the bottom towards the end of 18. But he said that the priests are questioning him. "I've spoken openly about the world," he says in verse 20. "I taught in the synagogue, the temple, where all the Jews congregate." He says, "I haven't spoken anything in secret. Why do you question me? Question those who have heard what I told them. Look, they know what I said." You see, they were even questioning his disciples about his teaching. And then in 22, he said, when he said these things, one of the officials standing by slapped Jesus, and said, "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" Wow. Jesus said, I've spoken wrong. If I have spoken wrongly, give evidence about the wrong. But if rightly, why do you hit me? And so he sent him then to Caiaphas. And so we have Annas, who is a high priest, but the chief high priest, Caiaphas. So we're seeing this process, this tier. We see outside what is happening outside of Pilate's chamber, obviously in the realm of Jewish religion, Jewish faith. And so it's interesting that Annas is not going to put all this stuff on himself, because it seems like there must be doubt, right? This is not a delicate matter, so he wants to send him up. Well, Peter denies him, but then as he is going, we see what's happening, that finally in 28 we pick it up where they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. Caiaphas is the same thing. Caiaphas definitely does not want his hands, to be dirtied from this. So what is he going to do? He's going to let the Romans do all the dirty work, right? That's exactly what religion does. It passes that, even with the fact, if you're going to charge him, then execute him, right? If it was worthy of Old Testament type death, then what's wrong with that? And for some reason, there obviously is doubt. There's doubt. But here's the thing. If the Jews execute him, think about this, it would just be revealed to the Jewish world, right? If he would have stayed in that group that was around the high priest and they would have put him to death, it would have been just like a normal Jewish execution, stone him to death, walking away, and the family had to deal with the body, right? There would have been a large crowd. It would have been really quick and easy. And so, but the thing about this is, get this, what Jesus is about to do is going to be on a great and grander scale, right? A great and grander scale. It's going to be on a much larger scale than just limited to the Jews. It is going to be on a worldwide stage, right? And so as the Romans, as he gets led to them, Pilate does the same thing. In verse 29, it said, it was interesting because they did not enter the headquarters themselves. Why? They weren't supposed to be around Gentiles during the Passover, right? It said they did not enter the headquarters themselves, otherwise they would be defiled and unable to eat the Passover. So they wanted to defile themselves, so they just passed him off like a pawn, right? And so Pilate came out and said, what charge you bring this man? And then they're speaking to him, and I bet it was some massive social distancing, right? There was massive social distancing. So Pilate's probably way off, and he already knew what was going on. Pilate happened to be in town, it's Passover, he didn't want any, uprising. He had come from probably right at Caesarea Maritima, which is right there on and I probably butchered that name, but he was on the coast in his beautiful palace, and so he has to come back to Jerusalem because he doesn't want any stuff messing up. He doesn't want any uprising, because that's generally where there's time when they were doing that during Jewish feasts and festivals. But here they are, some massive social distancing, and they're yelling out. It said, this man weren't a criminal, then we wouldn't have handed him over to you. So we're charging him. And Pilate says, well, you take him and judge him according to your law. You didn't answer the question. That's the thing about religion, right? It's deceptive. It's kind of like getting you to believe something that it's a system, right? It's not necessarily truth in a lot of cases. So let's just pawn him off, right? So he said it's not legal for us to put anyone to death. They said this so that Jesus' words might be fulfilled, indicating what kind of death he was going to die, right? It's not legal for us to do that. So here, you need to take him, right? So Pilate went back to the headquarters, he summoned Jesus and said to him, are you the king of the Jews? And notice this, that Pilate is, in verse 33 to 38, it says that we see this, we find out that Jesus' origins. He says, my kingdom is not of this world. Pilate is discovering exactly who Jesus said he was. And he did this from the very beginning. John does this well in writing the gospel, right? My servants would fight so that I wouldn't be handed over to the Jews, but as it is, my kingdom is not from here. In other words, I'm not here as a military mission. I'm not here on a political mission. He's here on a spiritual mission, right? And so he says, well, you're a king then. Pilate says, well, You say that I'm a king, but I was born for this. I've come into the world so to testify to the truth. Again, going back to John 14:6, right? I'm the way, I'm the truth, and the life. What did he say when the Holy Spirit was come? Sanctify them by the truth, right? Everyone who is of the truth, he says, listens to my voice. And this is one of the key questions that John brings out and records from what Pilate says. Then what is truth? What is truth? That our world has been looking for the answers to this question, right? What is truth? We struggle with that because a lot of the world believes that there's no absolute truth, right? That truth is only in theory. It's only what it is that I want it to be, right? And so here Pilate understands the notion of truth. Everyone wants to believe that our efforts then therefore are true. But he was talking about, it was almost an invitation for Pilate even to join him. So if Pilate is going to condemn Jesus, he is going to condemn truth. Think about that just for a moment. Jesus said in 9:29 that he came into the world for judgment, right? He came into the world to make sure that humanity understands what truth is, right? And he talked about it over and over again. So Pilate has been challenged. He's already revealed this to him, and he cannot recognize the things of God. He doesn't understand that. So it's interesting that John actually shows that Pilate doesn't even answer the question. Pilate doesn't answer the question. He said he went out to the Jews again, and I find no grounds for charging him. You have a custom that I release one prisoner to you at Passover, so do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? So at least he acknowledged what Jesus had said. He assumed after what Jesus said that, oh, you are a king, right? You are a king. You are self-proclaimed. They shouted back, not this man, but Barabbas. Barabbas was a revolutionary. Heavy irony comes when Pilate calls him the King of the Jews, right? And he lets the crowd do with what they want, because he doesn't want an uprising, a civil uprising in Jerusalem. Because if Caesar hears about it, he's going to be upset, and it's going to travel downhill, and then Pontius Pilate is going to be in trouble, right? But here we have this scene in chapter 18 closing in the fact that God's will would be done, that they're going to reverse and release a known revolutionary, Barabbas, to crucify an innocent man. Right? To crucify this. It's interesting because we read more of this, it kind of the word for revolutionary is also for terrorist, right? He is a known terrorist, a man who is a genuine threat to Rome. The Romans want him in prison, right? They want him in jail. They want to crucify him. That's the guy that needs to be put to death. But instead, because of the Passover, he gets to go free. And Jesus, a man whom there's no danger, there is no threat, his followers will not fight. He goes to the death. He goes to the death. The thing about what Jesus said, greater love hath no man than this, that a man would lay his life down for his friends. Greater love. That's what greater love is. And I know I said that all wrong, but anyway, he would lay down his life for his friends. Wow. That truth is very evident here. God's plan is being unveiled. And I want you to pay attention to the questions that Christ asked Judas, that Christ even asked Pilate, that the conversations that he had with the high priest. It's so evident. God's plan is very clear. And Jesus is willing. That's the thing. He humbly is going to the cross to sacrifice himself for our sins. Let's take that and let's be thankful. Let's be appreciative. And so as we dig into the Passion story, I hope you get it closer and closer to Christ as you read more and more. I hope you have a blessed day. Today we're praying for our police officers, our dispatchers, our law enforcement. Take them to the Lord on Tuesday is what I call it. Don't forget we're writing cards, and so we have those totes on the front porch of the church building during office hours. So we have a tote for police officers and a tote for firefighters. If you want to write one to dispatchers as well, we would love that. We're doing this for 2 weeks, so you still have some time. Grab a card, make you a homemade one, tell them how much you appreciate them. Okay? God bless you, folks. Have a wonderful Tuesday.